Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Blue Devil Beat. I'm your host, Ranjan Jindal. You're joined by my co-host, Caleb Dudley. Caleb, how are you doing this weekend, man?
Good. It's cold.
Yeah, it is very cold. It's a long weekend, though, which is nice.
Yep.
We're also joined here in our studio by Alex Min, who is one of our assistant Blue Zone editors and another one of our men's basketball beats. Alex, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So we're joined with Alex because today we're going to talk about Duke men's basketball's West Coast trip. Duke took on Cal and Stanford and emerged unscathed from that tricky two-game stand over in California. So we'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about the football news. Obviously, if you did not hear this weekend, Darian Mensah announced his intent to enter the transfer portal from Duke after declaring that he would return. So we'll break that down a little bit. It's very confusing about what's happening, but I'll try to give a little bit of an explanation. And then we're excited later on in the podcast, we're going to bring on James Lombardo, of sports editor of the Old Gold and Black, to preview Duke men's basketball's contest against Wake Forest. So Duke has a week off, but that game is Saturday. So we'll talk with James about that later in the podcast. But first, this podcast is brought to you by Duke Stores. Support your favorite Duke team. Duke Stores is home to the only collection of merchandise brought to you straight from Duke University. Go to shop.duke.edu for all of your Duke merch. All right, so we'll start with the Darian Mensah news. So this was Friday, I believe. Mensah announced his intent to enter the transfer portal, and there was a lot of discourse around what was happening. But basically, Mensah had signed a 2-year contract with Duke prior to last year, and the number was disputed, but upwards of 7 figures, and there was a few millions in there. And essentially, what happened was Mensah decided to forego the last year of that contract and enter the portal. So people are wondering, why is this allowed? What's happening? The first thing that's important to note is that these college contracts are not pay for play, or not supposed to be pay for play, and college athletes are not employees of the universities. Therefore, it's not like a standard contract like a coach would be for a college or a professional team. So these contracts are a little bit finicky in that sense, and there's not a standardized method of signing these contracts, and each conference kind of has a template that they use for their revenue sharing agreements. And just a reminder about what the House settlement did say. So there's 2 ways players can get payments. One is revenue sharing directly from the school, so $20.5 million that the school can choose to distribute to their athletes. And then NIL, which is supposed to be separate from the school. They're independent collectives that pair students with sponsorship opportunities. Now, what's not always clear in these contracts is what percentage is rev share and what percentage is NIL. But in Mensah's case, Duke, from what I understand, Duke had the revenue sharing rights or revenue sharing part of the deal, and Mensah, by foregoing the contract, can't earn revenue sharing at another school because of that. Now, what Miami, some schools theoretically, Miami, is doing is reportedly paying him a lot of money, especially in the NIL realm of things. Now, what the House settlement was supposed to do is create a third-party enforcement mechanism called the NIL Go. It's through the College Sports Commission, and they're supposed to review the legality and the market value of all of these deals to determine, whether it is of true market value. Apparently, a lot of those rulings are going to come down later in the spring, and so who knows what's going to happen with a lot of these contracts. Now, what Duke can do, I mentioned that each of the contracts are a little bit different. Duke's contract does not have a buyout clause, unlike some of the others that you might have seen with some Big Ten and Big 12 contracts. The Washington quarterback, Damon Williams, had a buyout clause in his contract reportedly, and so did Brandon Sorsby's. So there's not that, but there still is reportedly some legal action that Duke could take. We'll see if Duke does in any sense of the way, or sue for damages or something like that. But basically, that's a long-winded way of saying we don't really know what's happening. There's a lot going on. And I think it really is just indicative of the power of the player in this case, and maybe the need for future reform, even though we just had some reform. So we'll see how the College Sports Commission works and everything like that. But maybe this means that, contracts are going to be uncapped in the future. There's reporting from Yahoo's Ross Dellinger that some administrators are in favor of just like getting rid of that, the clearinghouse as a whole. So we will see about all that. Thoughts on the Darian Mensah situation from either of you guys?
Yeah, I think on the field, there's obviously an impact as well. Duke's now without probably the best quarterback in the ACC coming into next year, ahead of a season where the Blue Devils seem to have a lot of momentum after winning the ACC championship and bringing back a lot of talented players on offense. The timing of the decision is not very beneficial for Duke as well. It's the last day of the portal. When he went in, left Duke about 6 hours to try to find a new quarterback. I don't think they're going to go after anyone that's in the portal. Most of the quarterbacks have already kind of signed somewhere. So it seems like Duke's going to roll with either Dan Mahan or Terry Walker next year, redshirt freshman or true freshman. Um, yeah, it's obviously not a good situation for Duke and Manny Diaz. The offense, there was still time, I suppose, for other players into the portal. So we'll see if any guys like Cooper Barkhead or Nick Shepard also enter the portal and follow suit. But it leaves Duke in a pretty bad spot heading into a big season.
Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, just what Caleb said. You are now going into the season with your quarterback room probably as the most unsure part of your roster, rather than it being a certainty. So yeah, pretty much everything that you have already assumed about next year, you can throw out the window because who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, it seems like Duke is going to be in search for a quarterback, and right now Henry Beelan, who was the backup last year, entered the portal and committed to Missouri State.
Yeah.
Freshman Dan Mahan is on deck, and you're right. At this point, Mensah left on the last possible day to enter the portal, so Duke is put in a precarious situation. But stay tuned for updates. I honestly have no idea where stuff like this will go, but it's an interesting situation because I think this might be. We haven't really seen anything like this, right? We say that a lot in college sports recently, but with the situation, signing a contract and then kind of leaving, there's happened a couple times this offseason, so maybe that's a indicator for future change. I know a lot of administrators and people are looking for congressional action on antitrust, on college athletics, on employee status, on all that. There was a SCORE Act in Congress that was floating around, didn't really go anywhere. So we'll see what happens, but our government does not move very fast. Let's put it that way. So, yeah, I'll just leave that there. But very interesting development for the Duke football realm of things. All right, let's move to basketball. I mentioned we'll have Wake Forest's sports editor on later, but we'll talk about the recap of this week. Duke defeated both Cal and Stanford by a sizable margin, and these are games that it's tough to travel, the time adjustment. Both teams are playing pretty decent, especially Stanford. We'll talk about that. Alex, you covered that Stanford game, and I thought it was one of the most impressive games from Duke this season. What did you see from Duke in that win?
Yeah, it was just a true wire-to-wire win. I think defense really got them going early, complete shutdown of Stanford and their scores. I don't think Stanford really got much offense going until, I would say, late the second part of the first half. But also, it was interesting offensive strategy, I thought.
Yeah.
You take 10 threes. That's by far your lowest total of the season. I think the other maybe in the low 20s. Certainly 10 is by far the lowest. And you go to Cam Boozer early. Like you know what works. You settle into that early, and then you build inside out. So I thought that was an encouraging development to see. I think just know that they can play multiple styles of basketball, especially kind of realizing that this team is not last year's team with efficiency and volume from threes. So yeah.
And Duke had been plagued by slow starts a lot of this ACC slate, but that didn't seem to be the case in Palo Alto. What did you see from that start, like Alex was talking about, going to Cam early and setting the tone?
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, I think it was one of, honestly, Duke's best starts of the year, and I mean, maybe one of the best games Duke's played. A lot of that goes to Cam Boozer. I think he started out 3 for 3 from the field, and I think the first 3 or 4 possessions he had already 3 buckets. But I think, especially Boozer, the defense for him has improved so much these last 2 games. He just seems a lot more active with his hands. Seems like he knows where to be, a little more confident in his positioning on the floor. It's resulted in some steals, some just errant passes from the other team. But then on defense, obviously, I think Dame Sarr has been the story. Stanford, Abuka Corey had, I think, 38 against North Carolina the night before, and Dame Sarr absolutely shut his water off in Palo Alto. I think he had 9 points. Just didn't have anything, and a lot of times Duke was doubling him too on the catch. It made things really hard for the true freshman. So yeah, I thought the defenses looked really, really good. It had a couple games there after Texas Tech and the games after where it looked a little shaky, but it looks back to being elite level.
Yeah, Alex, thoughts on that defensive performance from Duke?
I mean, it was suffocating, I think, in truly every sense of the word. They were everywhere in the passing lanes. I mean, usually it's Malik Brown leading the charge, and I think he did again, but it was a group effort more so than I think we've been accustomed to regularly. It was also interesting to see that this is probably the starting lineup moving forward after some changes.
Yeah, good point.
We had Malik starting, and Nick Hamania starting for maybe a stretch of 5 games. But it seems like Dame's back in the starting lineup, as well as Pat Ngomba just for the future. Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like benching Pat for that one game kind of lit a fire under him and got him to perform really well. But you're right. If I thought the point you made about offensive strategy is interesting because Duke was not, efficient from deep at all. But the inside out game is really there, especially if you feed Cam in. Duke has capable shooters that can shoot, and teams are going to be forced to choose to either double boozer and leave open shooters. So that is an encouraging development. We didn't talk too much about the Cal game, but thoughts on that one? Another solid win against a team who had a solid start to the season. Not great in ACC play, but another team that can trip up
Yeah,
on the road.
I thought again it was. I thought Duke did really well on defense. Obviously, 56 points against Cal. I think they scored like 95 against North Carolina in the next couple of days. So Duke did well there. Sauer again did a really good job on Day Ames, who's Cal's best scorer. I thought Boozer played super well again, 21 and 13. But yeah, it was kind of another slow start. Duke was up 7.5, but trailed for a lot of the first half. Yeah, I thought it was another solid game. Nothing crazy, but solid. Isaiah Evans again has kind of emerged as the second option behind Boozer. I think pretty firmly at this point. He had 17 points in that game. So yeah, it was another nice win out west.
Yeah, and Duke is now 17-1 and 6-0 in the ACC. Sorry, and I mentioned this week off, and Duke will now take on Wake Forest at home on the CW 5:45 on a Saturday. Yeah, so we'll take a quick break, and we're going to talk to James Lombardo of the Old Gold and Black when we come back. All right, everyone, welcome back to Blue Devil Beat. We're super excited to be joined here by James Lombardo. James is the sports editor of the Old Gold and Black, Wake Forest student newspaper. James, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man. So we're here to preview the Duke-Wake Forest basketball game, which, like we mentioned, is this Saturday. Wake Forest still has a game in between against SMU, but Duke has the week off. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about the season so far? Wake Forest is 11-7, 2-3 in the ACC. Feels like close games have kind of been the story of the year so far. So why don't you give us a quick rundown of what's happened in this slate?
You're completely right. Close games have been the story, and as a Wake fan, it's been really hard to watch. We've been losing all the close ones. 1 point overtime loss against Michigan. Texas Tech came right down to the wire. At least we hit a game winner against Memphis out in the Bahamas. But our last 4 games have been decided by 4 points or less each, and it's just a problem with closing. We've been saved by Nate Calmisa's late game heroics several times already this season. But yeah, the big story so far this season though is Juke Harris's breakout.
Mm-hmm.
Going from 6 points per game off the bench as a freshman and now true sophomore now, averaging 20 points a game, fifth leading scorer in the ACC. He's been an absolute awesome blast to watch. Bringing high energy all the time, grabbing rebounds, which is a big problem for our team right now, is rebounding. That's why we lost the Miami game the other day. But non-conference play just did not go well. And starting off 2-3 in the ACC, we're basically at a must-win point in the season if we're going to want to make the tournament. We're going to have to make a run in the ACC tournament if we're going to want to make the NCAA tournament at this point.
Yeah, you mentioned Juke Harris. Obviously, he's had a really nice year for the Demon Deacons. What do you think? He improved on the most from last year. Obviously, he didn't play much, and then just kind of give us a scouting report on him as a player.
I think a big thing was opportunity. Hunter Salas, Cam Hildreth, those guys, were really dominant on the ball last year, and the offense was pretty slow and designed really to get, Salas into his mid-range spots where he can go to work. But I think Steve Forbes' schemes are, more tuned to Juke Harris's abilities now, where, he's going to get open threes. It's just, is he going to hit them, right? And he's been hitting them at a decent clip this year. But the big part of Juke's game is getting to the foul line. I mean, he's a great free throw shooter, and he knows how to draw fouls, draw contact. He's got a lot of and ones this season. But yeah, and him finally being like the focal point, I think has really helped him as well. A lot of our class last year graduated, so him now just jumping right in that starting lineup. He's had the opportunity and he's taken it and he's absolutely ran with it. This is a guy who wasn't being talked about as an NBA prospect at all. And now, you see some mock drafts, he might be going in the second round. We'll see if he gets, a lot more money next year at a, larger, better program. NIL nowadays, you never know where someone can transfer. But yeah, he's been absolutely incredible this season.
Yeah, and you mentioned the departures with Hildreth and um, even Tyler Johnson and Hunter Salas. Sorry, names slipped my mind. And then Forbes went in, get Miles Colvin from Purdue. You mentioned Cal Meese. Talk a little bit about the rest of that guard room and how they've complemented Harris. How have they played this year, and what can Duke expect to see from that backcourt?
Yeah, well, I mean, Calmise and Harris, like that's your kind of Batman and Robin. It just really depends which one of them is going to go off that day, right? Because they've been playing incredible the last 5 days. And Miles Colvin, let's talk about a highlight reel right here.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this guy might be one of the best dunkers in college basketball. I'd put him second behind Cohen Carr of Michigan State. Just that's my personal opinion. Obviously, I'm a little biased there, but you got to watch out for him in the fast break, and getting lane steals. Cal Meath and Colvin get a lot of lane steals, and especially off blitzing screens as well. They look to run in fast break, and Cal Meath can find Colvin on fast break. He can find Harris on the fast break. Even Trayvon Spillers, our undersized big man, he's fast, dude. He can run the floor and he can dunk the ball. So the guard room this year, it's really been, Cal Meese is the lead ball handler. And he's just trying to set Juke Harris up, another player who might not get a whole lot of love, but played amazing in his first game of the season. Makai Mason, he dropped like 25 points his first game of the season, and has kind of fallen back off to the bench. But he's a great guard. He can shoot it if he gets hot. You're looking at a guy. If you guys might remember the name Damari Monsanto.
Oh, we remember.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like that, if Makai Mason gets hot, I mean, you look out, he might drop 20 points. And it's with a snap of the fingers, right? Like, so yeah, you got a lot of guys that are dangerous, but very streaky as well.
Caleb and I talk about Monsanto a lot.
What an interesting story that guy had, but he definitely had some unlimited range.
Yep.
The last two games for Wake Forest, like you mentioned, they've all been close. You had the close loss against North Carolina, and then the narrow win against Florida State. Just talk about those two games, and what went wrong in the first one and what went right in the second.
Yeah, well, I mean, North Carolina, like we had no business ever being in that game. We got lucky. It was, we were down 15 points with a couple minutes left, and it was just some late game heroics. Again, a little bit more from Cal Meese. If he had made a game tying shot overtime, we'll see what ended up going, what would have happened in overtime there. But we had no business being in that game in the first place. At Chapel Hill away, fans might have been leaving the stadium a couple minutes early, and then Wake goes on this thunderous run. But we've been getting ourselves out way early, right? We'll lose the game in the first half, and we're gonna have to count on ourselves to fight to make it back in the second half. That's what happened against UNC. Thankfully, against Florida State, again, Cal Meese's late game heroics, hitting that fall away floater, whatever you want to call that. Uh, you know, I hate to say it, but like really skilled, awesome shot, but it was kind of lucky, right? Florida State does not have a good record right now. And we had to, rely on a last second shot to put the game 69 to 68, in the last 6 seconds of the game, and then we had to play some defense. It hasn't been good. We're playing a little bit down with competition, I think, sometimes.
Mm.
You've seen that earlier this season. But at the same time, against guys like UNC, against guys like Texas Tech, Michigan, we're playing up to the competition in those games, right? So what's going to happen against Duke? I couldn't tell you. Like maybe Duke, you know, for some reason, because they have a number next to their name, number 7, I think now, or is it 6? Which one?
6 right now.
Yeah,
I
we'll
guess
find out.
coming out in a couple minutes.
Yeah.
New one, yeah.
So because they have a nice 6 next to their game, next to their name, our team is going to decide to play a lot more inspired, right? I could totally see that happening. I could also absolutely see Cameron and Boozer getting 25 rebounds against us, and we're out of the game the entire time.
Well, that's a good segue to my next question. And obviously, the strength of this Duke team is its interior with Boozer and Ngongba. And you mentioned a little bit of the undersized nature of Wake Forest's interior with Spillers, and obviously you don't have Efton Reed anymore.
Right.
What does this front court have to do to neutralize Cam Boozer? And can you talk to us a little bit about some of those players in the interior?
Yeah, they're gonna have to play physical. I mean, that's tough. It's a top three player, in all of college basketball right now that you're trying to stop. Probably gonna be, first, second, or third pick in the NBA draft this coming summer. And it's tough because he's bigger than all of our guys too. Cooper Schweiger, transfer from Valparaiso. He doesn't have the size to stop Boozer. Neither does Spiller. So, it's gonna have to be double teams, boxing out, doing all the simple things and playing their absolute tails off. I mean, if you're physical with Boozer, he's gonna be physical. He's gonna be physical back. You guys have seen that all season long. And you're just gonna have to keep responding. Use up your fouls. You've got five of them, right?
Yep.
Wake has struggled. Wake has struggled sometimes, with getting in foul trouble, but if we got to go, deep to the bench, we don't have a deep, big rotation, right? So, you know, really getting, a double team as soon as he catches the ball from one of the guards, maybe a guy like Colvin, I think could really rattle him and, really help our chances there. Cause, I don't know how Steve Forbes is planning on stopping him.
Yeah. You just mentioned obviously one of the keys for you is to be physical down low with Boozer. What are some of the other things you think Wake needs to do to have success in Durham on Saturday, and some of the things they need to do to possibly win the game?
Yeah, I think Wake needs to play their brand of basketball. Like I said a little bit earlier, like Steve Forbes' system this year is designed to get open threes,
Mhm.
right? So let's get these open threes and let's make the shots, right? It's going to be tough. Cameron Indoor is one of the toughest places to play in all of college basketball, right? Everyone knows that, but it's in state. It's only an hour and a half drive. Like get ready, get prepared for the game. Take your open shots, make your open shots, try not to let the crowd affect you. And then again, play that physical defense that Steve Forbes loves playing, and also taking care of the ball. We turn over the ball way too much, right? And it's a problem with just simple mistakes that can be cleaned up, and also just bad passing, inaccurate, lane steals, um, how do you say it? Like telegraphing your
Telegraph.
passes.
Yep.
We do a lot of that. So just cleaning all that up and then making our open shots. That we're gonna get them. That's how Steve Forbes runs his offense. But are we gonna make them? Or is Drew Karras gonna make them? Is Nate Calmes gonna make them? Omaha Billy, former 5-star who went to Kansas and now looks, he broke his foot last year and now can't make a jump shot. High motor guy. That's another guy who's gonna need to really play physical with Cam Boozer, right? Like, so it's really, really just about simplifying the game and making your shots.
Yeah, Wake Forest is currently 15th in the ACC with a 33% field goal percentage. You mentioned they have possible shooters. They got open shots, so that'll be a big key. A lot of talent on this team, some upset potential here, and with the exception of last year's game in Cameron Indoor, most of these games are pretty close. Do you have a score prediction here for what you think will happen in Cameron Indoor?
I really think it's going to be close.
Yeah.
I'm a big, big believer of Wake Forest versus Duke
Yeah.
in all sports, but especially basketball. I'll never forget that court storm 2 years ago. I was there for it. I was courtside, sitting right there, watching that game, watching Kyle Filipowski. I'm gonna go 87-81, Duke Blue Devils.
That'll be a close
It's
one.
gonna be close, but I don't think we're gonna be able to stop Cameron Boozer. I don't be surprised if he goes for 30 points, 25 rebounds. I mean, he's going to be tough to stop.
Yeah, we'll see. It should be a fun one. Well, James, thank you so much for talking to us. Lastly, could you tell everyone where they can find you, find the Old Gold and Black, and your guys' work?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys can go to www.ogb.com. That's where you can find the Old Gold and Black. And sorry, wait, www. Did I say WFUOGB.com?
WFUOGB.com. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay, there you go. Perfect. That's what I meant to say. So
Sorry.
yeah, thank you guys so much. Really, really happy to be here, and go Deeks.
Awesome. Well, James, thank you so much for joining us. You were great. Have a good one, man.
Thanks so much. Have a good one, you guys.
Bye. Welcome back, guys. Thank you so much to James for talking to us. He was fantastic. Yeah, thoughts on this game? I think James outlined it pretty well. I think the key here is that Duke has the advantage in the interior, maybe a slight disadvantage in the guard play. So can Cameron Boozer take over? That's kind of my read here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think a lot of the games over the last 2 years were defined by Efton Reed being able to play down low with Filipowski and Kamal Malawach last year. Yeah, I mean, I think they're really at a disadvantage. Cam Boozer, he's 6'9", whatever, but he's a big 6'9", and he's been able to have his way against just about everybody. Even the top front courts in the country like Florida. I find it really hard to think that they're going to be able to stop him without some guys fouling out. Same thing with Gungba. I mean, Duke has 3 guys that are taller than Wake's entire team.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think Duke Harris obviously has a potential to go nuclear. We've seen that a lot. And Cameron guys come in, have a big night. I think that's going to be, again, Sark's responsibility. I'm sure they'll put him on. He'll follow Duke the entire game. So it's really going to come down to how Foster and Isaiah Evans can play on Cal Meese and Colvin. I don't foresee Wake. I see Wake keeping it close for a while, but I just think the front court is just too lopsided, I think, for Wake to come out on top. So I'll go Duke 85-73.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great defensive challenge, like you mentioned, for the Duke guards, because Dame's probably going to guard Duke, who is also 6'7", who has scoring potential on all 3 levels. And then, like Jacob was saying, you have the one guard in Cal Meese with the ball handling ability. You have Colvin, who has elite athleticism and can also, all 3 of them have potential to, shoot it. So we'll see. I mean, Cal Meese and Colvin are shooting 37% plus, and I think that's going to be the key to this game. Can Wake? It's almost similar to the Florida guard situation a bit, even though I think Duke has a much stronger advantage on the interior. But if they can shoot a few threes and make them, this will be pretty close. But again, I see Duke's advantage in offensive rebounding because that's a struggle point for Wake Forest, allowing Duke to win. So something similar, probably in the realm of 82-72 type vibes. I think Duke will come out with this one.
Yeah.
All right, we haven't talked about ACC basketball in a while, so let's do our annual, or I guess weekly, normally stock up, stock down, but it's been a while, so stock up, stock down, a team that's doing well and not so well in the league, as we're about a quarter way through the season. A little bit more than that, but
yeah,
third.
Yeah, I'll start, I suppose. I'll go stock up Virginia. I think we all assumed Virginia was going to be pretty solid, with Odom coming in after Tony Bennett retired. But they've looked really, really good. They're on a 5-game win streak now. Just beat Louisville and SMU last week, 2 huge wins. They got a team full of guys that are just play really well together. They have a deep roster. Malik Thomas in particular has been really, really good recently. Yeah, I mean they're third in the country in offensive rebounding. They control the glass. They shoot well from 3. Play good defense like Virginia always does. Yeah, not much to nitpick really. They have 1 loss in conference play. It was a 3 overtime loss to Virginia Tech where they just ran out of gas. But the Cavaliers look really, really good. Probably at this point, Duke's biggest challenge for the ACC regular season crown, if I had to guess. And then stock down. I think if you watched the Duke games this week, you also probably saw North Carolina's losses out west. Defense has just really been a struggle for North Carolina. They look out of sorts on defense, missing rotations, leaving guys open. It's just really been a struggle, and it's a shame because they have a really talented offense, especially down low with Henry Vasar and Caleb Wilson, who's had a spectacular freshman season. But until they figure it out on defense, it's going to be really hard for them to beat the ACC's top teams. I mean, they're giving up 90-some points to Cal, and they're letting Okoro go for 36. So it's just not a recipe for success. They're on a slide. They're going to need to turn things around quick.
Yeah, defenses seem to be a struggle for triangle teams the other two, I guess.
Sans Duke, yeah.
Yeah, Sans Duke. Except for that little stretch. NC State's not going to be my stock down, but they did lose to Georgia Tech at the home, probably the worst loss of the year for NC State. So they had a pretty good start to ACC play against some less than stellar competition, let's say. So they'll need to bounce back quickly against Clemson on the road tomorrow. Yeah. So that'll be big. Speaking of Clemson, my stock up is Clemson, who is now tied with Duke for 6-0 in the ACC. Brownell's done it again, 3 years in a row where this team is near the upper echelon of the league. And, it's interesting. After Zach Foster went out, I thought this team would take a pretty big hit, but what they've done is just adjust their play. They play slower, more defensive-oriented, just coming off a win against Miami, 69-59. I mean, holding a team that scores 80-plus points a game to 59. Holding Boston College to 50 is not a very good team, but Clemson is playing a lot of these defensive close battles.
Yeah.
And they have a very interesting roster in that they're very balanced and that anyone can go off on any given day. I think their leading scorer is scoring like 11 points a game. So that can be a good and a bad thing. Do you have that guy that can be the defining scorer come March? We'll see. But as of now, Clemson is tied with Duke, and I think that's going to be a very intriguing Cameron Indoor matchup on Valentine's Day. My stock down right now is Pittsburgh, who got absolutely demolished by Louisville, 100-59. I think Louisville was a bit angry after the past few games too, which didn't help.
Yeah.
But for Jeff Capel, they've just had so much talent over the past couple years, and you thought he was really rebuilding the program, and he was, but it just has not been pretty of late. You lost a lot of players, and over the past couple years, Cam Corrin's probably the best player right now, Florida State transfer from a couple years ago, but they don't really have a great identity and firepower offensively. So we'll see. They're a gritty team and can probably have some upset potential in certain situations, but just not a team that's going to, be back to the standards that they were for, the past couple of years, which has sucked for them.
Yeah, I think wouldn't be surprised if this was the last year for Capel.
Bring him back.
It's been a couple disappointing years. Yeah, I'm sure Duke would offer a spot on their bench. But yeah, I mean, I think the rest of the ACC, like you mentioned, State, they have Clemson this week, which would be a big spot for them. But yeah, I mean, it's really been. They had some tough losses in non-con, some close ones like Texas and Kansas, but Darian Williams has really not lived up to the billing for the Wolfpack. Yeah. He's preseason ACC Player of the Year over Cam Boozer and just really hasn't lived up to that expectation. I'm not really sure, what the problem is there, but obviously you hear Will Wade a lot of times talking about how he's fine and they're going to be all right. They've got a couple not too hard games coming up after Clemson. Chance for them to kind of springboard, but yeah, ACC as a whole, there's some pretty bad teams.
Yeah,
Syracuse is one of those teams who just lost to Boston College. Yeah,
I think there is this. The top half is better in the sense that last year there's like 3 good teams and the rest drop off. This year I think there's less so of that. I know Miami just lost to Clemson, but Miami is very, very well constructed in my opinion. I think they have solid bigs, solid guards. Trey Johnson was in hell against Clemson, but I think normally a very solid player. Malik Reyno scoring 20 a game, I think. He fouled out against Clemson, but that's a really good defense, but Miami is a team that could be solid. I think Syracuse with Donnie Freeman also has talent. SMU with Boobie Miller. Virginia Tech's just had some heartbreakers, man.
Yeah, they're good, though.
They're a solid team.
Yeah.
So I do think, and who knows where UNC is going to go, but obviously very talented on offense. So I do think there is some talent here that makes the top half of this league better, which is probably good for resume's sake in terms of a lot of quad one opportunities, especially on the road. Duke seems to have a lot of their toughest matchups at home the rest of the way. But still, Virginia Tech, UNC on the road will be some quad one chances.
I mean, you're up looking at KenPom now. You're up to 4th in conference rankings, which isn't what you. Obviously, you want to be first, but you're behind the SEC, the Big 12, and the Big 10. I think last year Duke was like hovering around the 10-11 range.
Yeah.
Decent amount of teams projected to make the tournament, which will be good for the conference. But yeah, there's definitely, the Florida State's, Boston College, Pittsburgh's not too good.
Nope.
But it'd be an interesting race down the stretch. I mean, you have Virginia has 1 loss, and then Duke and Clemson both have 0. So that feels like probably your 3 contenders for the title. But it'll be interesting the rest of the way.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the men's basketball slate. Quick update on a couple other things. Women's basketball
Heater
is absolutely killing it. They demolished Georgia Tech last night, and Carol Lawson's group is 8-0 in the ACC on a 10-game winning streak, tied with Louisville for the top of the league. Emily Skinner, the freshman, is redshirting, but that still has not hampered the quality of the team thus far. I think Jaden Donovan's also been out, but in her absence, players have stepped up. Riley Nelson has been great. She was fantastic last night. Duke has gone back to its defensive identity. We talked with Miles last week about the team, so won't go too much in depth today. But quality win for Carol Lawson's bunch. On the spring sports side of things, we're still waiting for a lot of seasons to start, but a couple sports starting. Women's tennis is starting today, so they're playing as we speak. I won't give too much of an update, but should be a solid team with a lot of young talent returning from last year. Liv Havda, Irina Balus, should have Jamie Ashworth's group back in contention for some of the top in the country. Men's tennis started its slate 3-0 after an undefeated week last weekend against Elon, James Madison, and NC Central. Duke's men's tennis started out, I believe, 17th in the country in the initial rankings. A different looking team for Ramsey Smith's squad. A lot of players left. So last year you had 10 plus players, and now there's only about 7 on the roster. But the top of the roster is very solid with Cooper Williams and Pedro Rodenas, 2 players that are 2 of the best in the country. So those will be solid in the singles lineup. So it's just a matter of the depth of this team if they can, take it far. But good starts for both the tennis squads, and then we have lacrosse starting in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we have
baseball,
softball. Softball just got a new pro team at their stadium, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Carolina Blaze of the Athletes Unlimited Softball League has announced that Durham's going to be its permanent home for the season, so which is pretty cool. I think that those kind of festivities are going on this week over on East Campus. But yeah, softball should again be one of the top teams in the country, and lacrosse is always a good contender. Yeah. We'll talk about that.
We'll have beats for all those sports coming on and previewing them. Last bit of news. Last week, Duke Volleyball hired Ahn Kim, who is the former American University coach, as their new volleyball coach. Jolene Nagel was the coach for a long time, but they parted ways after last season, which Duke has been really struggling with volleyball. So we'll see if Mr. Coach Kim can bring back the volleyball team. He had a really stellar tenure at American. So that's that. Anything else from you?
Yeah, national championship
tonight.
ACC.
We'll see if ACC can do it. Miami.
I'm not rooting for Miami.
Not anymore.
Yeah, come on, man.
Yeah, I think
Indiana's gonna handle them.
I agree,
but we'll see.
But Miami could keep it close. But that train is strong there in Indiana. So this would be a fun game to watch. Unfortunately, though, no college football for
we're waiting on that blue-white game. Dan Mahan blue-white game, man. It's gonna be
Dan Mahan versus whichever
Terry Walker the third. Ari Patu.
Okay, student walk-on trouts
for quarterback.
Yeah. I think
we're in a good spot.
Okay, well, I hope you guys enjoy watching the national championship game. Have a great MLK Day long weekend. Enjoy the week, and we will be back next weekend. For Caleb Dudley, I'm Ranjan Jindal. This has been Blue Devil Beat.